Hey there, Alan. I've got it on split screen, and the first video is actually your second video from the February 9th LPC swim video session. And on the right of your screen is the second video from your most recent one on April, what day was that? April 6th, I believe. So left is the second video from your February 9th. On the right of your screen is the second video from your April 6th. Let's replay it in full speed, then we'll watch it again in half speed and we'll compare, or we'll do more of an analysis on the most recent video that we captured. If you refer back to the analysis from February 9th, we talked a little bit how there was the right arm especially, the hand tends to creep up towards the surface as you start to begin the catch, and that causes a bit of a elbow drop, and you can see that on that first video. We'll take a closer look at the second video on the right to see if that is continuing to happen. So we talked a little bit about that right arm. I'm just going to put it in half speed now. That right arm, so it has a tendency to have a bit of a thumb first entry, a very slight crossover. Actually, both arms a little bit of a thumb first entry, slight crossover. Nothing glaring, all pretty minor. So there's no major changes that need to be implemented. But occasionally there's that slight diagonal thumb down entry crossover that requires a bit of correction. And we see when it's entering, especially on that right arm, that hand is pretty close to the surface. So in the second video, the most recent video, when you're entering with that right arm, it looks like you're not scooping upwards as much as you are on the February video, where that right arm enters and then it starts to scoop up to the surface. But on the most recent one, especially on that right hand, you can see how it's almost skimming the surface and it's still a little bit close to the surface. That hand is only a few inches below the surface, and ideally we'd like to get it about, at least 8 inches, maybe 10 inches below the surface before you start the catch phase. Whereas right now maybe it's only like 3 inches below the surface when you go to start the catch, and that's causing a little bit of an elbow drop. Let's take a closer look now at this second video from the most recent April session. You can see that thumb down and crossover seems to be a little bit less than what it was before, so that's good to see. It's entering there. I know I talked about in my basement how we'll see it maybe with this next arm here. So you can see how that even still, it's still a little bit of a crossover because you see the elbow here, but then the hand is right here. So think about more of 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock position, and then you're kind of rolling over the barrel and getting good hold of the water. So that's a pretty good angle. And then we talked about in my basement how sometimes it gets a little bit too extreme, but that's really good right there. So that's pretty much ideal of what we're looking for. Now let's see on this next stroke here. Let's go back. So here it's getting a little bit too right there. So it's good right there, but then it continues to sweep inwards a little bit excessively. Not a big deal at all, because again that hand is still kind of to the left of that center line. So, but we talked about in my basement how in terms of angles of the arm, that's a good angle right there. What is that, around 90 degrees or so. We don't want it to get really beyond 90 degrees. And then there, now it's starting to creep into whatever, maybe that's getting close to like, I don't know, 60 degrees or 65, 70 degrees or so. So this is pretty minor because you're still holding the water well and you're not really crossing over at all. So it's not something to think about too much. We're just trying to clean up that entry, that thumb entry to more of a slightly more of a flat entry, that entry to slightly more of an 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock. I mean, technically it's more like 11:30 and 12:30 is what we're looking for, but we have a tendency to getting really close to 12 o'clock with that entry. You can see right here, right? It's crossing over just that little bit, and then it's correcting itself. Above the water, the stroke is looking good. Bye position's good. The roll is good. So that's why we're really we continue to focus our attention more towards that hand entry in the start of the catch because everything's looking pretty good. Your stroke rate seems to be consistently better from the very first video that we took in February, where I believe the stroke rate was like in the 50s. Now you tend to be around like 70 or so, 70s when you're at that mid-race pace velocity. So that's a better stroke rate to be at, especially in the open water. The posture is looking good, the head positioning is looking pretty good, the way you're breathing is looking good. So it really is just focusing on that very front end of the stroke. Just going to go back just a little bit there. I just want to see this. So right there is good. You see like the surface of the water is around there. That's a pretty good place to be at the start of the catch. So now the goal, of course, the evolution from that is let's try to get some EVF. So at this point, we're looking for that motion there as opposed to a single arm straight. And you're eventually getting in there. So we see right there, now you're starting to get some really good EVF right here. The goal is that we want to try to do it a little bit sooner in the stroke. Now let's take a look and see if we can see that other arm. You see that right arm there? Oh, I'm starting to come up above the surface now, but you can see how that hand is going to be closer to the surface. If I rewind back a little bit here. So here's the entry with that right arm. You see how it's skimming the surface. There's the surface there. There's the hand. And then you're starting the catch. So we want to try to get it a little bit closer to this left arm where it's a few inches below the surface, and that will help to try to keep the elbows a little bit higher in the water. Overall though, again, it's not glaring because you're not significantly dropping the elbow. You're still holding the water well. We're not seeing like a whole bunch of bubbles around this area where you're losing lots of water. So everything's all leading to pretty good forward propulsion. We're just going to try to optimize it just that little bit better. Overall, it's looking good, and I do see a little bit of forward progression from that February video. So that's good to see. Keep up the awesome work.